We laughed so much because we thought you looked like an alien. But then,
But I
worst
was so
father ever. But
cute.
you were cute for an alien, but you were so adorable, and then you became so beautiful. Like it was so funny to watch. Like we thought you were adorable. I mean, you're our daughter, and you were adorable. Everybody thought you were adorable, but but to us it was like this running joke that we had a little alien baby and stuff like that. But then you blossomed into this like super beautiful, adorable little girl. We're just like, wow, she ain't an alien no more.
And now look, I've regressed back into alienhood.
Oh, now you're a beautiful young woman, but yeah, trust me, I've been making fun of you from the day you were born.
Wow. Well, that's a great place to segue into hello everyone. Today we're talking about family trauma. Uh so
You no kidding, eh?
so let's start by unpacking mine.
Which goes back from the minute I came into this world.
Yeah, my trauma's been forming since I came out, and my parents were like, "Ah, look, ugly little alien."
No, not
Oh,
ugly,
sorry,
adorable
weird,
little alien.
weird little alien.
Well, it's because you looked a little bit like ET. You had this huge head with the teeny little body.
I think that's still true. Oh,
Oh,
at least our guest in the last episode, my wonderful Aunt Ivory, at least she was always on my side.
no, she wasn't. Well, she was. We were all on your side, but we all agreed you look like ET.
Okay. Well, I'll keep that in mind when you look like ET
Dude,
pushing your little walker around.
I'm getting that close to it right now, man. You should see me in the morning. It's just like right now I look all whatever, but in the morning it's like uh, coffee. It's like ET, go home.
Benjamin, phone home. Wow.
uh,
Well, I think we're very excited because it hasn't been just you and I in a podcast for ages now, a long time.
I know, but we have so much fun. We gotta make sure that at least every other episode is just you and I because we have so much fun.
I agree. And so, for those of you just tuning in after that long giggle fest, which, if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you're probably used to, we are adding a new segment of the podcast. So, every other week, we'll have a full episode, what you're used to by now, a full interview, or it'll be a full conversation. And then the week after, while you're getting your little teaser video, what you'll also get is a conversation with my father and I unpacking the last episode that you would have just heard. Unpacking loosely, but we'll be having a conversation and talking primarily about that episode.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. It's super exciting.
It is exciting.
That's kind of my
And
response for everything, isn't it? Oh, it's super exciting. Yeah,
it
yeah.
is, but it's a good thing. And I am excited to start with this episode because obviously I've known my Aunt Ivory my entire life. So she's a guest that I think I know relatively well. And I learned a lot more about her listening to that episode or editing that episode than I had ever known. We did an episode with her before, but I think, or rather, you did an episode with her before, but I think a lot more information came out in this episode that really highlighted the difference between how the two of you process things and how you've always processed things. Would you agree with that?
So I'm just trying to. So what did you get the most out of the first one compared to this one? I know the first one you were kind of like you found it really interesting the dynamic between all of us.
Yeah, it was really interesting, but it was definitely more of like a scene setting episode because I didn't realize how much you guys had gone through. I didn't realize that you lived apart for a while, that she was living with grandma, that you were living with grandpa, and the way that your brother pit the two of you against each other. Like that was all new information to me. So that first episode with her was really interesting in that it kind of set up the whole conversation about why the two of you even have this trauma to begin with. So then this episode, which is technically part two, but it's part one of an episode that I had to cut in half because it was so long. But we actually got a little bit more into the actual conversation about healing and even coming to terms with the fact that you have trauma and having all of these triggers. Like she talked a bit about her picker, I think she called it her picker being broken, and always picking these people that will kind of turn around and use her, but you don't understand that that's a trauma response that you're having. You don't understand why you're doing that. You're just like, well, I'm broken and these are the choices that I make, or I just like guys that treat me like shit. But in reality, it's it comes back to all these things that you guys talked about in episode 1. So that was really interesting for me to see how it all came around and to dive a little bit more into how she actually copes and has coped with it.
Hmm. Yeah, like our processes were very, very different for dealing with it, right? I mean, because I find it so interesting. And for me, in many ways, it's almost hard for me to understand. And yet, I understand that a lot of people are like this. But she, she still feels it, whereas, like in a way that kind of hurts her. Whereas for me, it's just like I'm so beyond the pain of it at this point. It's just like I said in multiple interviews, and what I as I said in relation to that trauma, which again, it was really hard to highlight how harsh it really was because it was very, very harsh.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, to me, it's just like, fuck, yeah, but look how strong I am. Like, look how
Hmm.
strong I am. Like, I listen to other people. I listen to, I don't know. It's just so to me, it's just like, it's like, oh man, I'm so glad I got through that because God, like, what could break me now? Where she's just like, yeah. So to me, it doesn't even feel like pain. It feels like a blessing.
Hmm.
So I find it quite interesting in how we have processed it differently.
And I think for me at least, the way that Ivory processes things, the way that she experiences trauma, like her side of this story is a lot more relatable to me than than how you deal with it. And so I'm inclined to believe that a lot more people can understand how she feels. And I think that there's a part of us, the hanging on. I mean, nobody wants to hang on, but I do think, just thinking back to the way that she talked about it and the way that she articulated it, a lot of it feels like not hanging on and still being hurt for the purpose of like it just still hurts me, or oh it just still, or it's not a it just whatever. It's like it turns into a defense mechanism, so that if you still feel a little bit of that pain, it's like you won't do that thing because you're still a little bit hurt, as opposed to moving on and forgiving, or to whatever extent that you do either of those things, and feeling like you might open yourself up to making the same mistakes, which I don't think is true, but I think it's a rational, not rational. I think it's a trauma response that I can understand, that your brain might go, well, as long as it still kind of hurts when you poke there, you're not going to do that thing again. So it's interesting. It's really interesting
Mm,
that, and I think you both, obviously, you're both super strong for coming out of it, but it doesn't really seem like she gives herself credit for that as much.
mhm. Yeah, well, again, I'm not really sure exactly, but I think one of the differences is that she never really had something that I remember her doing that really kind of was like where she poured herself into it. It's just like, oh, okay, well, all this pain, I'm pouring it into this. Like she had the interest. She was an amazing singer. She was in a
Hmm.
band. She played guitar. She was super, super smart scholastically, but I don't remember her really having anything that she poured all this pain into. Whereas for me, it was very, very distinct. It's like all this pain is going right into boxing and it's going right into bodybuilding, and that's where it's going to go, and that's where it's going to live. Right?
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And then as I got older, it went right into the Goliath Foundation. It's like all that pain is like the biggest blessing for this, and that's where it's going, and that's where it's staying.
Hmm. So why do you think it is that, because just to bring it back to my previous point, I think that her side of this story is one that a lot of people can relate to and understand. So why do you think it is that people don't have these things that they pour their, their feelings into? Do you even have any thoughts on why that might be?
Well, I do have some thoughts. I do have some thoughts, but I'm not sure that is right. But my thought about it, and again, it's personal. Like I personalize a lot of things, right? I can personalize it and then I compartmentalize it. But in my mind, I felt like, and Ivory might disagree with you, but I felt I was in a much, much darker hole than she was. I felt like I was much more. I mean, I was admitted to the hospital for a suicide attempt. I was like really, really, really like I did not know how I was ever going to live another day with this pain, and I'm not sure that Ivory really felt that at the bottom of the barrel, like where for me, I totally felt like it's either off myself or freaking go the other way. And for whatever reason, I think I think it created such a desperate need. Like if I get out of this, I got to go out all the way. I got to get out all the way. There's no going back, and there's no half stepping this. I got to go all the way, or else I'm not going to make it. Whereas I think if you're, it's kind of like you could put your hand in a pot of hot water, and it would hurt, and it's like, oh man. But if it's freaking boiling hot and you put it in there, it's either going to rip your hand, burn your hand off, or you're going to get that thing out and it's never going back there again. You know, I don't know if that's a good example, but it's like I think there comes a point in people's lives where it's like it could be a numb pain that goes on forever, or it could be a really sharp pain that's super brutal, that feels super brutal to you, that either kills you or elevates you way beyond it. So I think that was kind of, and again, I'm not sure that that's 100% true. That's only my perspective um, to answer the question, but I kind of feel like it's some the answer is somewhere along those lines for the difference in how we process things.
Yeah, it's interesting while you were talking, I kind of had the phrase come up of being like not sad enough. And so it's kind of like and let it not be said that I'm diminishing or overplaying either of your traumas. I think you both went through absolute hell, it sounds like. And I don't think one of you suffered more or less than the other because I wasn't there and I can't say that for sure. But what I do think is that the way that it's experienced was so different in that I think for you it was crushing and for her it was life. It was just the way that life was. And so it comes to a point of like because you're talking about basically hitting emotional rock bottom. And if you don't hit that, if it's just like the emotional, like this is just life, this is just life, it sucks, it sucks, it sucks, it feels really bad, this is life. It's like you're not sad enough. And I'm using quotes because
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to be more sad, but like how shitty to live in a place where you're not sad enough to get out of it when
Yeah.
like you've just accepted that this pain, like you've accepted chronic pain, and
Mm-hmm.
now you can't hit that rock bottom because you've just come to the point where you've accepted that life is painful. And so
Yeah.
you can't even feel that sharp pain anymore. You can't even like you don't even notice that it's boiling anymore because you've just accepted that like, oh well, like whatever, like this is it, right? So that's very interesting. It's interesting that it seems like she kind of yeah, it just got to a point where it was like she couldn't be sad enough for it to be a
Yeah.
crisis. She just had to make it work every day.
Yeah. I think one of the differences was, again, as we talked about, and again, I'm not minimizing her. See, the way I remember it, and again, this is my perspective, but the way I remember it is like she said in that that video, like our mom was a train wreck. She would
Hmm.
cry and she'd be depressed, and she'd bring these people over, and Ivory, your aunt, would have to listen to it, and she'd have to sit there, and she'd have to be like, and it was like it was, and so she'd kind of try to soothe herself with food, and my mom tried to soothe her with food, and and it was like this dull ache that just went on and on and on. And then on the weekends, she would come to our house, and there'd be like intensity, but
Hmm.
it'll only be for like a week, like a weekend,
Yeah.
where it would be like really intense, where again we're slapping pucks at her and beating her up and all this kind of stuff. But then she would go back, and it would be like, so it was like, again, it was like really intense, and then it'd be like numb, really intense, and then it would be numb. But
Hmm.
I think the difference for me was, I mean, and also she she did very well in school. She was a very good student, and she was very good musically and stuff like that. And I had things going for me too. I was an athlete and whatever, but I felt I really didn't do very good in school. I was getting in trouble. I was getting arrested. All those kind of things. So I think there was just always much more of a sense of desperation. And again, when Gabby would go home at the end of the weekend, I still knew that on Monday morning I was going to get my head kicked in, and I was going to get my head kicked in every freaking day, all throughout the week until she came back. And I'd still get my
Hmm.
head kicked in, but at least she would be there, right? So for me,
Hmm.
again, that level of desperation is like, well, I'm failing and I'm drowning and I'm getting my head kicked in every day, and there's no escape for me. Whereas again, that difference between going in and out of like intensity to this numbness, to intensity to numbness, was probably it was super painful, but not enough to but just not quite, like you say, it was just not painful, quite painful enough.
Well, and that swing from intensity to numbness is another way that your brain and your body are going to develop the coping mechanism of it's just temporary. So every weekend was just temporary, but every week would also end and it would be something else. So like it absolutely makes sense that a person's brain would get into the rhythm of this is just temporary. I just need to get through it. Oh, it's Thursday. I just need to get through to Friday, and then I'll be out of this house with all the crying and the sadness. Oh, it's Saturday. I just need to get through Sunday, and then I'll be out of this house where
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting my shit kicked in. And what I think is so interesting about the aspect of like her doing well in school and you obviously not doing so well in school is that, and knowing that your mom was so focused on academics, that is a huge metric for mental illness in girls because most of the time that girls are doing well in school, parents don't think that there's anything going wrong mental health wise. They think that everything's good because you're doing well in school. And that's why so many young girls who do take their lives, all the responses are like, no, what? She was a grade A student. She was doing really well. She da 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 da. But it's like because someone's doing well in school, they assume that there's nothing going on with them. And because they aren't doing well in school, they assume that there is. So it's like the education system still hasn't quite caught up to that
Mm-hmm.
metric. So it's interesting. There's so many interesting parallels between the two of you and your stories and the way that the different kinds and intensities and varying intensities of pain shaped you both and how it allowed for you to make such a sharp change in your life when you really like
Mm-hmm.
got down to the wire, down to rock bottom. And and she had just trained herself to accept that, you know, that it would change eventually. And she
Mm-hmm.
just had to kind of get through another day.
Well, I think another thing that's kind of interesting is there's another thing that I think what's been really hard for her. I knew, or I felt, I don't know if it's true, but I felt like nobody really gave me much of a chance. So there was nothing really. There was, in many ways, there was nothing really expected of me. Whereas with for her, she was a very good student. She did do very well, and she had to take care of our mother. Like she literally, again, I was not aware, but now I know. I do remember after our conversation, this and that she basically was a counselor at like a very young age for our mom. So she's this smart kid, she's this skillful kid, this great singing voice, she's got all this stuff going, but she's got all this trauma that she can't deal with because she's got to be a nurse to her mother, and so she almost in a way wasn't even allowed to deal with it. Whereas for me, um while the trauma may have been more intense, nobody was expecting anything of me. I wasn't really responsible for anything.
It's like
So
you only had up to go, right?
I
Like,
had only had up to go, and nobody was counting on, nobody was relying on me. Whereas for her, I mean, she loved her mom, and she was a good kid, and she was all these things, and our mom needed her.
hmm
I mean, our mom was dying for one thing. I mean, she wasn't really dying at that point, but we all knew she wasn't going to live forever. I mean, she lost her eye, then she lost her legs, then she lost the use of, then she basically went in a coma and died, right? So,
hmm
and my sister, Ivory, is basically kind of knows this is going to happen at some point. She's kind of watching it happen. She's watching the mental breakdown of our mom almost on a daily basis, and she's smart and she knows that things are expected of her. So she's got a nurse. So that must have been again and again. It's kind of interesting to talk about all these years later because I never really um, thought that much about how hard that must have been for her or hard for
hmm
anybody. I mean, there's lots and lots of people that again they're in this real painful situation, but they have to be the strong one. They have to be the one that takes care of their parents and their kids or whatever. And it's very painful, but it's not so painful that it's just like I'm out of here, like I'm out of here, like whether it's
Yeah.
emotionally or literally physically, where it's just like the pain is so much is either going to break me or I'm just out of here. It's like that happens probably in a billion household or like a I don't know, a billion. And and
In 20 billion households worldwide. These are me, trainer, psychologist, psychiatrist, sociologist, Ben Smith. I know the statistics, and I can tell you that in 200 billion households worldwide, every day, someone is sad.
Hey man, let's not forget I went to college for sociology. my two
For one semester. Oh, sorry, was
my
it two?
two semesters.
Yeah,
I
and I
know.
have a certificate in psychology, so we're both equally certified to talk about this.
But don't be a fool. You shush up now, ET.
So anyway, on
um,
the next episode about my childhood trauma, we'll be talking about my dad.
um, but anyways, yeah. So I again, I never really thought that much about it. I knew that she had trauma, and
hmm
I knew kind of how it was. But as I step back from it now, yeah, like you say, that realization that it was painful, but it just wasn't painful enough. Like,
and
ugh.
not in a diminishing way, but in a just numbness, like
Yeah,
constant drum of stuff and having to keep showing up. Like it sounds like she just had to keep showing up. So what else do? You can't hit rock bottom. You have to keep
yeah.
showing up. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see that I see that in people like where they're in these horrible relationships or these bad relationships,
hmm
even abusive relationships, and it's bad, but it's not like somebody putting a gun to their head and maybe not even smacking them around or whatever, but it's just constant little like nags and why is dinner got to be this way and come
hmm
on, like why are you always so late, well I start just constant where it's just like oh man, this person doesn't lift me up at all. They keep breaking me down. But better to be with them than to be alone or risk
Yeah.
being alone or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's easy to see the more you look into it how someone can get into the routine of just not being, I'm not sad enough to get help. I'm not sad
Hmm.
enough to go to a therapist. I'm not sad enough to be on, to be admitted to the hospital on suicide watch. I'm not sad enough. And maybe you even get to the point where you want to be sad enough, where you want
Hmm.
to like, hey, I feel like I should call somebody and say that I need help, and you're like, I'm just not sad enough. I'm just
Hmm.
I'm just not sad enough to deserve that. So it's
Oh,
interesting, right?
Well, I mean, for anybody listening to this, then we should kind of really highlight the fact that the long term consequences of that numb pain could potentially be worse
Hmm.
than the hard or the harshest pain that's not as long, right? So get help, seek help, ask for help, do whatever it takes because you don't want to live like that.
And being sad at all is sad enough.
Yeah, being sad at all is it should be unacceptable to everybody, right? I
Hmm.
mean, just unhappiness. What I've learned, um, what I've learned and what I've come to accept is that any level of unhappiness should be unacceptable to anybody. You
Yeah.
should never be less than content and at peace with your life.
Hmm.
Like anything less than that, in my opinion, is unacceptable, and it requires a paradigm shift in the way of like in your thinking, in your how you process it. And there's an interesting thing. I don't want to go too far on a different topic, but so I as I told you, I read through um, Lighting the Blue Flame from Clint
Hmm.
Adams again. And the Clint Adams is amazing. And that book is about bullying, but he gives all these strategies. And he and I did a podcast. So anybody listening to this, go back to the Clint Adams podcast because we talk about blue brain, red brain, or he talks about blue brain, red brain thinking.
Hmm. That was
And
episode 67 for those of you
yeah,
keeping
okay.
up.
67. So I'm gonna delve into it much more with him because having read his book and really thought about it in my own way, it's like that red brain blue brain thinking is really crucial to keep you on that state of like where it's like well unhappiness is unacceptable or whatever. It's like
Hmm.
am I in a red brain thought or am I in a blue brain thought? And you can if you start to recognize that there is a difference and there's a feeling. And Clint Adams mastery is or brilliance is his mastery at getting people to understand and learn to recognize the difference. And if you can get, and I've done that for myself, and I actually said to him, "Wow, I did this. I did this to myself for myself, but I did it just intuitively. I did it intuitively over time. So that's why I'm always happy, and people are always like, "How do you remain happy?" It's because I didn't call it, for me, it was the happiness line, right?
Hmm.
That we've talked about. There was the happiness line. For him, it's red brain thinking and blue brain thinking, right? Which is exactly the same way thing, but his is probably an easier way of understanding it, maybe. But it's the exact same thing.
Hmm.
And it works for sure. You just
Yeah.
have to, I mean, again, it's one of those things where I think that anybody that feels like they're going down that road where that numb pain is just going to be something that's going to linger, and they're going to struggle with a state of or being able to accept that unhappiness on any level should be unacceptable. Check out Clint Adams. Check out the video that we did. Check out the book, and even reach out to him because that's what he does, right?
Hmm.
He's a self help and a psychologist, and he's really an amazing guy.
Yeah, well, for those of you listening, I will add his links down below this episode, as well as where you can listen to that episode where we talked to Clint. Like
Mm-hmm.
I said, that was episode 67, so I'll link that below. I'm looking forward to hearing you guys have another conversation,
Yes, we're gonna have a
Mr.
series of
Trainer Ben Smith.
conversations, and we're gonna have a series of conversations.
Cool.
So yeah,
Well, I'm looking forward to it. But for now, that was our first unpacking episode. How do you feel?
uh, I feel a little bit guilty about teasing you about being ET, but also oddly joyful about it. Like I felt like I got a lot off my chest. I felt like I've been wanting to tell you that as an adult after telling you so much as a child.
Hmm. I feel a little bit like this might be my rock bottom. So so if you get an email, which anyone can do, by the way, if you get an email saying, "Hello, I'd like to get one-on-one coaching sessions with trainer Ben Smith because I'm going through a crisis right now," which you the listener could do at lovinggoliath@gmail.com. You'll know it's from
Whoa.
me as as I'm trying to deal with the trauma of my parents calling me an alien.
The best. Hey, by the way, speaking of as you're doing your thing, so we have a new sponsor.
We do have a new sponsor.
No.
I was not prepared to do this read right now, but future Willow will be more than happy to tell you all about that sponsor right now. We'd like to give a huge thank you to our new sponsor, Go Primal Apparel. By using our code Goliath10, listeners can get 10% off all purchases made at goprimalusa.com. That's code Goliath10 for 10% off. Go with confidence, go with pride, go primal. Thank you again to Go Primal Apparel, and now back to the video. There we go. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for making the time to have a conversation with me. I hope that my Aunt Ivory listens to this and isn't like, wow, these guys are jerks.
She's
I
been
th-
saying that about us for me for years.
That's true. I'm an angel. You, on the other hand, not so
Angel
much.
slash alien.
Angelian?
Hey, Julian.
All right.
Awesome.
I gotta go edit this episode because it's coming out tomorrow. So those of you listening to this right now, this is the most on time an episode has ever been. So please enjoy that.
Tomorrow.
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 Yes, sir. So thank you. Thank you for joining me. Listeners,
Thank
thank
you.
you as always for being here. We appreciate you. I'm sure that you'll hear all about the rest of our services, what we offer, how you can be in touch with us, and more. But before all of that, we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you all so much for joining us, as always. We love hearing from you, so if you have comments, questions about the episode, topics you want us to cover, or anything else, you can find us on Instagram as Loving Goliath, on Facebook as The Goliath Foundation. You can email us at lovinggoliath@gmail.com, or you can find out more information about the Goliath Foundation at thegoliathfoundation.com. Hey, did you know that 36% of our listeners tune in through Apple Podcasts? If that's you and you liked what you heard today, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you again, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.